Yeah, yeah. Making her way to the mic. They start dimming the lights. You start feeling alright. From Birmingham, home of the Teddy Longs, and the room is stutters. More once you discover. For all of the lovers, Whitney Houston and Roman Reigns. For all of the lovers, and Mickey James and Marvin Gaye. For all of the lovers, and Sasha Banks, Janelle Monáe, Silk, Sonic, and Paige. Allow me to say, look, I just found a place, sweet escape for every one of us. I was kinda late, so I just made it off the struggle bus. Walking by the fate, cause I know it's right in front of us. Yo, I ain't with the hate, gotta focus on what's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Steph Hardy is on the air. Had to drop a couple bars just to make you all aware. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. You know I go by Joe or the rest of the flow, yeah.
Hey y'all, welcome to a new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. And of course, this is my working camera. You can see my face now. So for those who were watching on the live feed last week, I did a whole episode and the camera on one of my phones was not working. So I did the whole show thinking it was working and it wasn't. And then when I posted it, it wasn't on there. But either way, the situation has been rectified and now y'all see my face. So welcome to the ride. Welcome to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Of course, I am so happy to be on here to talk about all the goings on of wrestling and everything that has happened within the past few hours. Like, so much has gone on this week leading up to a big event known as Money in the Bank for WWE. And then last weekend we have Forbidden Door with AEW and New Japan. Like, so much has happened and so much content has popped off. And wrestling has just been moving at an all-time high. And it's just been really great. But I knew I wanted to come on, to do a regular episode and talk about, everything that I had went through in wrestling this week. Even though this week I also had to host at least 4 after shows for Women's Wrestling Talk, write an article, release an article, and do all kinds of journalistic things. But either way, we are here and I'm so happy to be here. So, of course, you know that throughout the history of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, we've always started with news and gossipish. But this time we're going to do something a little bit different. Something that really resonated with me this week was the newest episode of the Dark Side of the Ring series, which is, of course, a Vice series that they have on Vice Television, where they tell different unknown stories about what went on a long time ago with various wrestlers, with various situations in wrestling history that you may or may not know about. And there was one story in particular that happened this week that I felt really fascinated with and wanted to discuss. But please know that if you are in the comments, since this is live, thank you for watching on any live platforms. Since this is live, please comment and talk about anything that you liked about wrestling this week or anything that you might like throughout the show as I talk about it. But yeah, I watched Dark Side of the Ring, and their episode was on someone really special and someone who I really hadn't heard that much of. Well, not really. I won't say heard that much about, but not someone that I knew about in my wrestling world because, of course, I'm a little bit younger. But their episode this week was about the Junkyard Dog. He is one of the top Black wrestlers from a long time ago, like in the 80s and stuff. So I really didn't know that much about him growing up outside of him being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Actually, no, that wasn't even my first time seeing him. My first time seeing the Junkyard Dog was at the Raw, I believe, 10th anniversary show, and my dad had it on DVD. And they had this show at WWF in New York, which is like this restaurant that kind of puts you in the mind of Hard Rock Cafe, except it's centered on wrestling. And I hate that I never got a chance to go there because it closed. But either way, like, they had this one segment where they were paying tribute to people who had passed on. And they had the Junkyard Dog in that segment. And that was my first time ever hearing about him. And I thought that name was really funny, but I just never knew who he was or what his history was with the company or with wrestling at that point. So I learned more about him once he got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. And it was a really cool class because that was also the class that was tied in with WrestleMania 20 weekend, which took place in Madison Square Garden. And that was the 20th anniversary. And that's where Eddie Guerrero actually retained his WWE Championship against Kurt Angle. I believe John Cena won the United States title for the very first time. And a certain person who shall remain nameless won the World Heavyweight title at that point. But either way, that's what was going on at that time for me. And they inducted Junkyard Dog into the Hall of Fame. And someone who I'll bring up as I talk about this episode a whole lot, Ernie Ladd, who was also a wrestler and a booker, inducted him and gave the speech for him. And the honor was given to LaToya Ritter, who was Junkyard Dog's daughter. But as I continue to talk about this episode, I'm going to share a lot of things that I learned. I learned that he didn't initially start off in WWF. He, of course, started in Louisiana, or at least got his big break in Louisiana at Pro South Wrestling. But before he went to Pro South Wrestling, he actually tried to get a wrestling career started in Canada, because in this picture, if you're watching live, you can see he was fighting Jim the Anvil Neidhart, who is, of course, the father of Natalia. And he really tried to get his wrestling career going in Canada. But of course, he was a football player, and he was also another type of athlete who was more of a street fighter and a brawler. So at that point, as Big Daddy Ritter, there was only so much he could do, because back in the day they weren't really looking for a babyface black wrestler, because of course you still had the racial glass ceilings that a lot of wrestlers had to deal with back in the day. But this is him in 1979 fighting Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and that's just so crazy to think about. Like, that's really crazy to really think about at that point. But once he went back to the United States, he was able to get in contact with someone named Cowboy Bob, I'm sorry guys, Cowboy Bill Watts, who was the promoter and the owner of Mid-South Wrestling. And in Mid-South Wrestling, as you can see, this is more of an older territory from back in the day. For those who may or may not know, wrestling was separated into different territories based off of what region you were in the United States. And they were all separated like that until, of course, Vince McMahon decided that once he acquired WWF as his own company from his dad, he wanted to make it more of a national thing. And he basically monopolized it and bought, when little by little started taking talent from these promotions and started to create more of WWF as a national brand. But Mid-South Wrestling was one of these promotions that was, of course, based in Louisiana and also Mississippi. And Cowboy Bill Watts decided to take a chance on him, even though he was a black wrestler. He saw something in him. So around this time, this is where he started becoming more exposed to the Louisiana audience. And a lot of people really loved him at this point. And of course, since he, like I said earlier, since he wasn't a technically sound wrestler like a lot of different other people who he was wrestling with, he was a brawler. Wrestlers who worked with him had to be able to work around his strengths and weaknesses. And one of his biggest rivals in Mid-South Wrestling turned out to be Ted DiBiase, who of course we know as the $1 Million Man. But before he got started as a $1 Million Man, he was just a regular wrestler. And as it turns out, him and the Junkyard Dog were best friends, and they were close friends, so much so to the point that Ted DiBiase had the Junkyard Dog as his best man in his wedding. And that was really nice to know, because of course you think about Ted DiBiase as one of the top people, during the golden age of wrestling, and the idea that him and the Junkyard Dog were best friends was just very fascinating and also very heartfelt and touching, because as you watch the episode, you can hear how Ted DiBiase spoke fondly of him and spoke of him, as if that was his brother. So Ted DiBiase was his first big rivalry in Mid-South wrestling. And of course, as his star began to rise and as people started flocking to Mid-South Wrestling to see him more and more, he started, growing in popularity. And he was placed as a featured talent, which was a big deal for a black wrestler at the time. He drew in mad numbers in New Orleans, and people loved him so much that in terms of kayfabe, people actually wanted to fight for him and fight on behalf of him. One person who told an amazing story about a situation like this was, of course, you had Ernie Ladd, but one of the people who told an amazing story about this was Jim Cornette. And he was literally talking about how people really wanted to take it so far to the point that they actually wanted to kill for him when they thought that he was blinded by the fabulous Freebirds. And it's just really insane how kayfabe really did, play into a lot of people's minds back then. They were just like, yo, like, you want me to, fight for you or shoot somebody for you and all this other stuff. Like, it's pretty amazing when you think about kayfabe and how now at this rate, if somebody had tried to do that to a wrestler and tried to believe that so hard, now security would tackle them to the ground and we wouldn't see them anymore. So yeah, it's just pretty insane to think about. But a lot of the voices, the one thing I did love about this episode of Dark Side of the Ring was that it centered a lot of black wrestlers and black wrestling personalities voices. Of course, you had Ernie Ladd, who gave the speech, and you also heard an audio clip of him speaking about the Junkyard Dog because he has passed away. But we heard his voice. We also heard from Coco Beware. If you may or may not remember him, depending on when you were watching wrestling back in the day, he had a place on the documentary as well. And as you can see, he's doing as well as he can be. And then, of course, you had Tony Atlas, who ran up and down the road with Junkyard Dog. And he is, of course, telling wild stories and as crazy as he's ever been. And then you had Big Bama Energy himself, Teddy Long, who is, of course, a manager, referee, jack of all trades in professional wrestling. And, of course, the guy who loves to book you to fight The Undertaker or in a tag team match. They all spoke in this episode of Dark Side of the Ring, and it was cool to hear their voices. But like I said, Jim Cornette told a story about the kayfabe situation happening with the Junkyard Dog and how people wanted to fight for him and how passionate people were when it came to storylines in wrestling. And Jim Cornette, as polarizing as he may be, he knows all of his stuff when it comes to professional wrestling, working in the indies, working with promotions and stuff. Jim Cornette is that guy when it comes to that, type of knowledge. And what's so funny is he seems to be a staple in just about every one of these Dark Side of the Ring episodes. It, like, you can never truly watch an episode of Dark Side of the Ring without him in it. And I thought it was pretty cool to see him talk about how crazy kayfabe is. But of course, if you listen to his podcast, or maybe if you don't, you may have heard a lot of his stories. But yeah, Jim Cornette was on there and he said a lot of stuff, but yeah, that was pretty much it for him. And of course, as the Junkyard Dog's star began to rise more and more, he actually visited a local school and they had a very special day for him. It was called Junkyard Dog Day, where he went and visited all the kids in the classrooms and signed autographs and gave them all kinds of stuff. And he loved doing stuff like that. They said he was very charitable. And at one point in time, he actually gave the chain that he used to wear around his neck to a child at a wrestling show. And that was just really heartfelt to actually see. Like, it was really nice. And after this point, they began to talk about how the Junkyard Dog came up and how he grew up. His real name was Sylvester Ritter, and he was born in North Carolina, and he was raised by his grandmother and his sister. And they lived in this very humble house right here. And the person who told the story of Junkyard Dog, the man, was his nephew. And he really did a great job recounting a lot of the Junkyard Dog's stories from his growing up and just coming up in humble beginnings, and how he never really changed who he was when he got up to the big time. So it was really nice to see stuff like that. And then we also saw more pictures of him and his daughter, his only daughter, Latoya, who really loved him and loved it when he was able to come home and actually dote on her. Because, of course, you know, when you're on the road that many times, it's like it takes a toll on you and it takes a toll on your family. But it's good to know that a Junkyard Dog was still caring for his daughter as much as he could, even while he was pursuing his career on the road. So yeah, this was him climbing up on the top rope with that chain that he was so famous for having on all the time. But in the midst of all of this, I had more pictures, but in the midst of all of this, at one point while his star was rising, Vince McMahon, of course, had taken over the WWF, and he was seeking talent to sort of help create more of a national reach with wrestling that his dad didn't necessarily do. His father wanted, of course, people from multiple backgrounds and stuff to be a part of the show. And then, of course, when you have Vince McMahon seeking to, you know, I guess monopolize wrestling the way he did and sort of take from various promotions, like I mentioned earlier, Junkyard Dog was made an offer that he seemingly couldn't refuse in terms of making more money for himself and also making money to sort of fit his lifestyle, which we'll get more into later. He decided to leave Mid South Wrestling for WWF. And this broke Cowboy Bill Watts' heart because Bill really did love him and they did grow close with one another. And he just didn't understand exactly why he would leave. But Teddy Long shared a story that Junkyard Dog shared with him, saying that he overheard Cowboy Bill Watts call him the N-word when Grizzly Smith came up to him and asked him, you know, oh my gosh, you know, he could very well, you know, get ready to leave and go to WWF. But Cowboy Bill said, oh, don't worry about it. That N-word is not going anywhere. And this, of course, angered the Junkyard Dog and broke his heart, I'm sure. And he left after that. And Bill Watts got on commentary and actually began to talk about, you know, all the reasons why, well, not all the reasons why he left, but mentioning him on commentary and how he mysteriously disappeared and all of that. And he was devastated by it emotionally. And then, of course, Dark Side of the Ring actually reached out to Cowboy Bill Watts about that comment, and he denied it and said that it was just purely fiction. So it's like, you, on one hand, you could kind of believe how he would say that to somebody, but on the other hand, and also hearing how much he loved him, I can't imagine he would say something like that about him. But I never want to call anyone a liar in terms of hearing something like that, because when you are a Black person, regardless of what time you come from, if you hear something like that, it angers you. So I will not say what is true or what's not true here on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. I am not speaking for these people. I am only recapping what I have heard from this show. Just want to put that out there. But if that was the case, then that shouldn't have been said at all. But you know, stuff happened like that, and he decided to leave after they mentioned the amount of money that he was getting paid, and they mentioned that at Mid-South Wrestling he was getting paid $2,000 to $3,000 a week. But of course, once he got to WWF, that started doubling, of course, with his action figures, with the endorsement deals that he got, and so many different things. So um we go into his WWF run, and after this point, you know, after he went to WWF, Bill Watts was very desperate to replace him with so many black wrestlers, to try to recapture that magic, but it wasn't helping. He tried getting George Wells, Brickhouse Brown, which is so funny because that's somebody that my dad brings up randomly all the time, and Butch Reed. So a lot of famous black wrestlers from back in the day, all made their way down to Mid-South Wrestling to try to recapture that magic that the Junkyard Dog had, but they just didn't have it for the New Orleans crowd. And Bill Watts was just in a terrible spot there. But in the midst of all that, you have the Junkyard Dog who's able to perform on these bigger platforms and bigger stages here as WWF began to rise. And he worked really hard to the best of his ability, but even though he would work side by side with the man formerly known as Hulk Hogan on this show, and he would fight in various matches and stuff like that, and he had an action figure that he was making so much money on, and of course he was endorsed with commercials, and then he was featured on a cartoon back in the day and stuff like that. And he even had a song with Vicky Sue Robinson which was called Grab Them Cakes. His nephew would go on to say that he couldn't sing at all, but either way, the machine was behind him a little bit in terms of that stuff, or in terms of entertainment value. But as far as being the top guy, there was a glass ceiling there. And I'm just going to be a little bit silent when I say that. Like, there was a glass ceiling when it came to Black wrestlers or any other wrestlers of color at that point in WWF to try to be the top guy or be put in that money spot, which was what I believe Coco Beware described it as. If you were a Black wrestler, it was like there was only so high you can go, simply because of the fact that Vince McMahon was trying to, of course, branch out nationally, and he wanted to feed into a more mainstream audience. And of course, when you say words like mainstream or broader audience, that usually means a white audience. And because of that, he was prioritizing putting people like the man formerly known as Hulk Hogan and like Rowdy Piper and like Bret Hart into the forefront, and no one like the Junkyard Dog. And this had a really bad effect on the Junkyard Dog. He was depressed about it. And it was really unfortunate because, like I mentioned earlier, Vince McMahon Sr., the dad of Vincent K. McMahon, as we know him now, was very big on, in the WWF, having people of multiple backgrounds being on top, because they showed pictures of Pedro Morales, who was of course from Puerto Rico, and Bruno Sammartino, and Rocky Johnson, who was of course The Rock's dad, and so many people who were on top in the WWF before Vince McMahon got a hold to it. Like, he wanted people of all colors to do it, whereas Vincent Jr. was trying to, branch out and give more to the wider audience. And this devastated the Junkyard Dog, and it devastated him because he felt like he let his hometown down, he let Louisiana down, he let his family down. He took it really hard. And when you take stuff hard like that, it tends to ruminate in your mind, and you get depressed about it. And this is what started happening to him. Like, he got really depressed to the point to where he was dealing drugs. Well, not dealing drugs, but doing drugs heavily. He got somewhat addicted to speed. He started smoking crack pipes and stuff. Like, I hate to be really graphic about this, but that's what the Junkyard Dog got into on the show. Like, he was really into a lot of different vices as his star rose, but because he was only allowed to go so far, he was depressed about it. And so he started not showing up to various shows, and because he started not showing up to a lot of different shows with WWF, Vince was forced to fire him. And it just got sadder from there, because after he got fired, he still tried to recapture some magic when Bill Watts was working for WCW at a certain point. But then it couldn't really happen for him in that way because everything had passed for him. And then he tried to wrestle in the indies, and that wasn't as lucrative or as successful. So he had fallen so far that he wound up working part-time at a Walmart, but he was still trying his best to take care of himself regardless. So as his life and his wrestling life began to deteriorate, and he started, less taking care of himself, his life took a turn for the worst. as he drove one day all the way from Mississippi to North Carolina to celebrate his daughter's graduation from high school. And he didn't make the graduation itself, according to his nephew, but he did make it to the celebration afterward. And he had stayed with the family, hung out with the family and everything. And after hanging out with the family, his nephew asked him, aren't you going to get somewhere to like stay or lay down a little bit? And he was like, nah, I'm okay. I'll just drive back. And he noticed that he had sort of uptrucked in the car, and he just decided, hey, I'm just going to go and just drive back home. And that was the last time his nephew and his family ever saw him. And the next morning, he got a call from his mom saying that the Junkyard Dog / Mr. Sylvester Ritter had passed away due to his car getting into an accident and running off of the road and him sustaining head trauma. And that was really sad because I did not know how he had passed away. I just knew he had died, but I just didn't think it was that bad. But his body was so tired that he fell asleep at the wheel and lost control of the car. And that's how it happened. And a lot of his family and friends were, of course, devastated. Even Ted DiBiase talked about the last conversation he had with the Junkyard Dog. He said that now that you are a minister, because of course Ted DiBiase is a minister / preacher now that you've had this change in your life, tell people my story and let them know not to go down the same road as I did. And Ted DiBiase said, okay, I'll do that. And that was the last time he spoke to him. And of course, now I'm sure a lot of wrestlers know his story, but they still sort of see him as a man of respect because he still did a lot when it came to paving the road for a lot of Black superstars that we see, like the Bobby Lashleys, like the Chris Bays, like the Carmelo Hayeses, and so many other Black superstars that we see rising today. This man had it all relatively early during a time in which it was impossible to have. And that is to be commended. It's to be lauded upon, and it's to be respected. So I'm glad that through this episode, even though it had a sad ending, and his life had a sad ending, his career can still be seen as something to respect and something to love on. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and his daughter Latoya accepted it on his behalf. But sadly, they did mention that she had also passed away at the age of 31 due to an enlarged heart valve, and there was nothing that the doctors could have done. And this broke my heart because, of course, at the Hall of Fame and during WrestleMania 20, that was the first time I had ever seen her dad or heard of her dad, and also seeing her. And of course, when you're walking around life in your mind, randomly people will come up in your mind and you're just like, oh, I wonder how they're doing, or if they're, doing okay or whatever. And as it turns out, she had passed away as well. And that broke me. Like, I started crying at that part because it was just terrible. The way his story ended was sad, but then the fact that she had such a short life was just devastating as well. But I believe maybe the only consolation is that her and her dad are both together. And she knew how great her dad was. And that's really all that matters, is that their love will keep them together on the other side. And that's all that matters. So yeah, this episode of Dark Side of the Ring was a lot, and it was pretty sad, but I still do recommend that you do watch it. I try my best not to watch Dark Side of the Ring a whole lot because, of course, when you love wrestling, you try to hold on to the parts that give you joy a lot. You try to hold on to it for dear life. And so when you hear a lot of the sadder stories, it's enough to make you, really upset and make you low-key want to give up and just be like, oh my God, what's the point of life? Why are we doing this? But at the same time, when you hear stories like this, it lets you know that sometimes even the most super of people can be human at the same time. So yeah, I just wanted to spend this time to talk about it because I didn't really know that much about Junkyard Dog due to, me being born in the 90s and stuff. But I am glad that I learned his story, and I'm happy that I got to share it on here and give it, the love and praise it deserves. And also, I loved the idea that in terms of life, it's very full circle that this episode came on right after we watched Carmelo Hayes defend his NXT championship against Baron Corbin. And when you think about Black superstars, like I said, you think about him and his rise and the week that he had this past week. And you can't help but wonder, or not even wonder, you can't help but think that all of that is happening because of the Junkyard Dog and the road that he and so many other Black superstars in this episode paved. So, yeah, that's my spiel on this past episode of Dark Side of the Ring. If you want to watch it, you can find it on YouTube and stuff. But yeah, it was a really good episode, and I do recommend that you do go and watch it and just embrace things. But we're going to move on to this segment where I get to talk about Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank, of course, took place in the O2 Arena in London, England yesterday, last night for anyone in London who's listening to this, and also yesterday afternoon for us in the US. Money in the Bank was fantastic. I enjoyed it. It was so great. It was a very high energy show, high octane show, and it was just a lot of surprises thrown in there that I just was not expecting at all. I was not expecting a lot of these surprises at all, but we're going to get into all the ones that really resonated with me the most. First of all, can we get into the fact that Shayna Baszler turned on Ronda freaking Rousey? Oh my God. Like, this came out of nowhere because, of course, Shayna and Ronda had been a tag team over the past few months. And, of course, they had just recently unified the women's tag team titles and the NXT women's tag team titles after winning them off of Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. And, they were carrying them with pride and talking about, how they were going to defend them everywhere and what they wanted to do with the tag division and stuff like that. And after the return of Liv Morgan this past week on Monday Night Raw, she decided to, of course, realign herself with Raquel Rodriguez because, of course, her and Raquel never lost those women's tag team titles. They had to relinquish them due to Liv Morgan's injury. So they decided to fight for the titles at Money in the Bank. And as they were fighting and as Liv Morgan was getting ragdolled by Shayna Baszler, Ronda tagged herself in and decided she was going to go on the attack and beat up Liv Morgan a little bit more. But then out of nowhere, we get this shot. Shayna Baszler attacked Ronda Rousey out of nowhere and shocked all of us. The entire O2 arena lit up with joy. And I hate to say that, but they really did light up with joy. They were like, yo! Like, we were all just in shock. And she choked Ronda out and beat up on her some more and left the ring. And Liv and Raquel took full advantage of it and became the new women's tag team champions, and it was just insane. All of us are collectively still in shock. My dad watched it back over and over again and was trying to figure out where the switch happened with Shayna. Nobody knows why this is happening, but I'm assuming we'll find out either Monday or Friday. But either way, this was shocking to me because on NXT this past week, Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend from the Metaphor threw out the gauntlet for a challenge to Ronda and Shayna. So you can only imagine my surprise when Ronda and Shayna wind up breaking up in such a dramatic fashion, and now we have Liv and Raquel as the new champions. But to be honest, I was trying to force my brain to sort of think about what would happen if Ronda and Shayna went to NXT, but at the same time, Liv and Raquel going to NXT would be cool too because they're an NXT alum, for real, for real. Definitely Liv. Like, she was in the beginnings of, well, not the beginnings of NXT, but still in the black and gold era. So that would be really cool. So big ups to Liv Morgan and Raquel, but oh my God, Shayna turned on Ronda and it was just insane. And of course, you could complain and talk about the hot potato manner that the women's tag team titles are being treated as because Shanna and Ronda just unified them, and now they're not the champions anymore. And you could address that and talk about how a lot of people feel that the tag titles have been cursed for a while. But either way, that's what happened, and that's just the facts of life. Live and Raquel are the champs again. So yeah, that was crazy. Then we had, of course, Zelina Vega, who was my absolute favorite to win Miss Money in the Bank, hitting a code red off of the top of the ladder onto Zoe Stark, who was just a pain in the entire butt of everyone at of everyone at Money in the Bank. It was insane. Like, I loved it, and I loved how she also beat up Zoe Stark with a purple chancla that matched her outfit, which was paying tribute to Frieza from Dragon Ball Z. So there was her, and then there was Ronda Rousey, who was dressed up as Majin Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z as well. So it's sometimes it just seems to me if you dress up as any character from Dragon Ball Z, you just don't have a good time in WWE. And both of these women lost, and it makes me low key kind of sad. But either way, I'm sadder that Zelina Vega lost because I really wanted her to win the Money in the Bank briefcase because that really would have been a great reward for how good she did and how much she's evolved over the past year and how good she did at Backlash against Rhea Ripley and stuff. But it just wasn't to be. And I'm just like, when are we going to give Zelina Vega a bigger moment? Now, of course, you can argue that she's already had her moment with her being the first ever Queen's Crown champion, which is something that they haven't done as a tournament as of yet, or if they'll ever bring it back, I don't know. I mean, she has been a women's tag team champion with Carmella. Like, I get it, but oh my God, I want Zelina to have a run with a giant title. Like, that's just what I want. I want more for Zelina because she's so good and she continues to improve herself and she continues to show that she's marketable outside of WWE when it comes to her ventures, when it comes to anime and video gaming and stuff like that. Like, she's very passionate about that. So she has all the makings of a star. So for the life of me, I don't understand why they don't give her bigger things. But I guess it's just hard to do when you have so many great women around her. But Jesus Christ, I feel like this spot was definitely one of the best spots of the night for real. Big ups to Zelina and Zoe for executing that as perfectly as they did. Like, it was cool. And then of course you have the winner, Io Sky of Damage Control. She wound up becoming Miss Money in the Bank after she handcuffed her friend Bailey to Becky Lynch as they were trying to climb up on the ladder. And this was definitely karma for Bailey because Bailey actually pushed Io off of the ladder when she saw her climbing up there, and she was just like, "I'm sorry, it's every woman for herself." And I thought this was a nice piece of revenge for Io Sky, for her to win it this way after being, essentially screwed over by your friend. Like, that was really cool. And Becky even had a really amazing spot in this match where she actually wound up jumping or splashing onto Trish Stratus, who was laid out on a ladder. And I want to give a big up to Trish Stratus because she performed relatively well for someone who did not have the opportunity to participate in a match like this during her first run with WWE. A match like this did not exist for the men or the women. So the idea that she was able to do it now and then do it after, she's grown as a woman now, it's just really insane. All these women did a fantastic job. Becky Lynch was like a house of fire, as they say on WoW Superheroes on commentary, but it was Io Sky's time, and big ups to her because she's a former NXT champion, NXT women's champion, NXT tag team champion. She is really decorated, especially when it comes to her career in Japan. So this was just really cool for her. And hopefully Bailey just won't rain on her parade so much that she, winds up getting angry and losing her Money in the Bank briefcase. But, in the press conference, Bailey was acting like she won it because it was Damage Control, but at the same time, it belongs to Io, and I'm gonna need for Bailey to sit down. So yeah, congrats to Io Sky for being Miss Money in the Bank this year. You deserve it. Also, this is another picture of her sitting up there and the other two looking sad and handcuffed. And this picture was taken, I believe, by Sean Ross Sapp. I want to give credit to him because he's really cool and he works for Fightful and he always has the inside scoop on things. So big ups to him for taking this picture. Um, Yeah, another great surprise that happened in Money in the Bank was John Cena surprising everybody. Like out of nowhere, this was after the Cody Rhodes and Dominic Mysterio match, which Cody won. Um, there was like a space where after that they showed commercials and they were also showing the lead up to a lot of different matches that were taking place on that night. And so the camera was on the crowd. But then all of a sudden you heard this familiar music and everybody starts screaming. I start screaming. I'm like, wait a minute. What? It's John. Oh my God, it's John. And it's just so crazy because even after 20 years, John Cena still gets us crunk like that. And everybody was singing John Cena sucks, but in a heartfelt way. Like it was just really funny to see him running up and down the aisles again. And he went up in the ring and grabbed a microphone and said, "Hey, you guys in London are great. The crowd is great. You guys are awesome. And this is the first time a WWE pay-per-view / PLE has been held in London in 20 years. Like, you guys are fantastic. You guys are the heartbeat of the WWE. You know, we're the people and stuff like that." And then he went on to elicit a challenge to those people in the back. What if we had WrestleMania in London? And of course, they went crazy for that. And in the press conference, so many reporters could not help themselves to ask questions to Triple H about the possibilities of WrestleMania being in London not next year, but the year after next. Because next year they're having it in Philadelphia. But yo, I feel like if the people of London had a WrestleMania, that would be really cool for them. Like they really are lit, and I would have a good time watching that WrestleMania or possibly being at that WrestleMania and screaming with the crowd that really is into everything, knows all the words to theme songs just like I do, and so many different things. Like they were just so lit the entire time from beginning to end. And that was a good idea that John Cena, put forth. And of course, he got interrupted by Grayson Waller, and then Grayson Waller tried to beat him up, but then John Cena gave him an AA. So I don't know if this could possibly lead to John Cena having a match at SummerSlam against Grayson Waller. But either way, it was good to see John Cena, and all of his words felt like a heart hug from him to the WWE Universe as a whole, and also to London. So congratulations to London. Y'all get to live with the idea that maybe y'all have a WrestleMania at some point. So big ups to y'all. That was great. Also with Money in the Bank, we had the men's Money in the Bank ladder match that took place, which opened the show. And Santos Escobar came out dressed in traditional Aztec wear. And I thought that was really beautiful because on Twitter, he did, let everyone know that this is Aztec clothing. And I was just like, that's really great because that's traditional Mexican stuff. And I just thought that was amazing. I love the LWO so much. And I wanted him. He was like my third choice to win Money in the Bank because I just love him. And then I also love LA Knight, and Damian Priest was my second choice. So if Santos had went on to win it, that would have been amazing. He did a phenomenal job with his Hurricanrana off of a ladder to someone. Like, it was just really good. If Santos had won, I definitely would have been okay with it. But it just seems like the LWO is like they always have, like, whenever they have 5 steps forward, they always get knocked a few steps back. And that just bothers me. It makes me sad. Like, I want them as a faction to be more dominant and be more, I guess, win more all the time. So hopefully at some point, they will be able to turn it around. But yeah, I just don't want LWO to be a thing just so they can sell cool t-shirts or just to say that they put all of these people together for the sake of doing it. Like, I want LWO to be as substantial as a faction as Judgment Day and the Bloodline was. Let's just say that. That's just what I want. I want them to be treated as a substantial team that deserves just as much love and appreciation and just as many storylines and just as many wins as every other faction that's ever existed. I just want more for the Latino world order. So yeah, his outfit was great though. But yeah, LA Knight didn't win, guys. I was so devastated because there was one point throughout the Money in the Bank match where he really could have won. Like, he really could have done it. Like, he was fighting people back and forth, and just about every time someone tried to throw him out of the way, he kept throwing them out of the way and punching them over and over again, kicking them. And of course, he was being very athletic and agile throughout this match, which is always surprising and always a treat to watch because he looks like your traditional heavyweight. But when he gets in that ring, he can definitely go toe to toe with the best of them, that have more like a high flying arsenal. Like, he really can go toe to toe with the best of them. And this was amazing to see. So you can only imagine my shock when he didn't win. Oh my God. My heart was broken into pieces that he didn't win. Not the same way as when Zelina didn't win, but my heart was broken all the same. But Triple H did say in the press conference that, LA Knight is a person whose star is rising and that they do see it and that, it's just the beginning for him. So maybe him not winning, isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but he was everybody's favorite. Like, he was one of my guests' favorite. Like, it's just like he's been everybody's favorite for so long. He's Raven's favorite. There we go. Raven's favorite. So it's just like, come on. But either way, people are still gonna love him regardless. It was so funny to the point to where they were booing certain baby faces. They were booing Shinsuke. They were booing Ricochet, or they were booing low-key Butch at times, even though Butch is from there. They were low-key booing him whenever LA was on a run and they got in the way. It's bad, but it's good at the same time because LA is a heel, but yet at the same time people are cheering for him because he's so charismatic and funny and he's viral all the time. So he'll have his moment. I'm trusting that he will have his moment. I'm choosing to believe that he will have his moment. So yeah, LA Knight, we still love you and it is okay. But yeah, um Damian Priest wound up winning Money in the Bank. And I can't say that he doesn't deserve it because, like I said earlier, he was my second choice to win. Damian did a phenomenal job at Backlash when it came to him fighting in that street fight versus Bad Bunny. He has basically kept his nose down and just done the work. And then on top of that, he kept that same mindset once he joined the Judgment Day. And Judgment Day really has done a lot of wonders for everyone in that group, for him, for Rhea, for Dominic, and the jury is low-key still out on Finn, but either way, it's done lots of wonders for him. And so for him to win Mr. Money in the Bank, it makes a lot of sense because ever since he got brought up to the main roster from NXT, a lot of people felt that he had what it took to be, the next up, the guy who could be, world champion at some point because he has the look, he has the swagger, so maybe we'll never know exactly who he'll cash in on. But of course, later on in the night, we did see him sort of dangle the idea of cashing in on Finn or Seth Rollins in that match. But he didn't do it. But I know that's still going to cause a rift between him and Finn in the Judgment Day. But either way, this is something that he gets to keep, in his possession for an entire year. And so does Io. So for all we know, he could cash in on anybody. That he could cash in on Roman, he could cash in on Seth, he could cash in on maybe Gunther or maybe Austin Theory. You never know. Or he could go down to NXT and do something different and cash in on Wesley or Carmelo Hayes. But hopefully he won't cash in on Carmelo Hayes because no, stay far away from him. But yeah, either way, congratulations to Damian Priest. He deserves this. He's cool. And yeah, it's just really good for him that he got it. So big ups to him, and also big ups to everybody who performed well in that match. Logan Paul did a good job too, but he still sucks, as the crowd said. So yeah. Yeah, and this is a beautiful picture that they shared backstage, both of them together holding their briefcases behind the scenes. So congratulations to both of those people. Then we had another surprise with the return of Drew McIntyre. Now, a lot of the rumors online have been talking about how there was some type of dispute that happened between Drew McIntyre and WWE, and a lot of people didn't know if he was going to come back. They didn't know if he was like well, upset because of how he had been booked, which wasn't in the main title picture. Like, a lot of people just didn't know what was going on. But, a few weeks ago they did show him doing Special Olympics stuff with WWE, and that kind of gave me the impression, well, maybe, it's not as bad as we think it is, or maybe it's just an injury thing. But yeah, Drew McIntyre made his return in the UK, where he's from, after Gunther defeated Matt Riddle for the Intercontinental Championship. Now, this harkens back to WrestleMania in April, where the both of them and Sheamus fought for the Intercontinental title in one of the best matches of that weekend. It was very hard hitting. They have that strong style that they're all used to. So it was just a really great match all around to be able to experience live. So now I guess Drew McIntyre is back and he wants a piece of Gunther. So a match between these two, a one-on-one match between these two, definitely has the capabilities of being match of the year. They haven't officially announced anything between them at this point, but Drew McIntyre hit him with a Claymore kick. So I can only assume that Gunther and Imperium did not take that well. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but I really want to see them fight each other and destroy each other. The same way I want to see Shayna and Ronda fight and destroy each other, like in a fight pit, because of course they both have that knowledge and that background. You just never know. But I was really excited to see Drew come back. Like, I missed him low-key. So him in this title picture, now that the IC title has been raised up with its stock, now that Gunther has held the title for such a long period of time and is looking to break the Honky Tonk Man's record, I just can't wait to see how it turns out. Like, I literally can't. This was amazing. Both of these big hosses are going to kill each other and it's going to be great. Not that I recommend killing, really, but, I meant in terms of wrestling. It's going to be great. But yeah. Then, of course, we had Damian, like I said, dangling the carrot in front of Seth and Finn, like I mentioned earlier. So there's that drama. But Seth is still the World Heavyweight Champion, and I'm glad he didn't lose. I am so happy Seth Rollins did not lose his title because it felt like he just got it. So for him to lose and, you know, with the Judgment Day having all of the titles and all of the yummies and stuff just would have gotten on my nerves. So I'm really glad that Seth still has it and he can be the workhorse champion that he really wants to be. So yeah, I'm really glad that he won. Even though Finn really was giving him heck throughout the match, I'm glad that Seth still won. But I'm more than sure Finn and Damian are going to have some words. And then, finally, we have the pin heard round the world. Jey Uso covered Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table, the one of one, the only one, the undisputed Universal Champion, in the main event of the Bloodline Civil War. I cannot believe any of this happened. I literally cannot believe any of this happened. This story has been firing on all cylinders for the past 3 years, and a lot of people online had the sentiment of, oh my God, this is wearing out. This is wearing thin. It's getting dry. It's getting stale. I'm getting tired of it, blah, blah, blah. But the way all of these people are acting makes it better. And I feel like I say this every week, but it bears repeating every week because it's just so good. The Usos are amazing when it comes to their acting skills. Even though they said in interviews that they never really took acting classes before, it's like when they're locked in on each other, it's just like they really do just be telling the story so well that you would think that they took extra acting classes and stuff like that. They do so well with their storytelling when it comes to the way that they speak to each other, the way that they speak to Roman and Paul and Solo and everything. They just speak so well to each other. And then on top of that, when it comes to the storytelling that they tell with their bodies in the ring, they do so well as well, because it's just like, it makes you think about how Jey covered and pinned Roman Reigns years ago, like back in the day when him and Jimmy had the paint on their face or whatnot in that match or whatever. Like the way that they were interacting with each other in the ring and how they were pulling each other back from checking on Roman and stuff like that. Like, all of the body language is just perfect. And Paul Heyman with his dramatic behind, dang near being in tears every time the Usos kicked out of a cover saying, what do we do? What do we do? You ain't gonna do nothing. You just gonna stand there and watch it all happen. You stay out of this, sir. This ain't got nothing to do with you. But either way, it was just insane to watch this match take place and to watch the embrace that the Usos had for each other. Like, and to watch Jay, who had been tortured by Roman for so long, finally get his comeuppance and be the first person to pin Roman Reigns in 3 years. Chef's kiss. I couldn't have asked for a better ending. I couldn't have asked for better freedom for the Usos at this point. Like, I'm just so happy for them. I'm happy that they're able to have this moment. Like, never in a million years when I first saw them, on Raw, that I ever imagined, and seeing them with Tamina as well, that they would get to this point. They won all the titles. They've had all the rivalries and stuff. They've been through so much. And to see them rise up above every obstacle and every adverse thing that's gotten in their way and get to this beautiful point of storytelling is just the most fantastic thing on the planet. I love the Usos so much, and unlike Roman, who likes to lie to them and tell them how folks wasn't checking for them before he came in the picture, we were always checking for the Usos. We always were, and we always will check for the Usos, okay? So big ups to Jimmy and Jay. I am so proud of them. I love them so much, and I wish they could come to my house so I can make them a plate of food, but it's okay. They're just amazing, and I'm almost scared for Solo Sikoa now, because the Usos planted a seed on Friday Night SmackDown saying, well, we know we don't want to be the tribal chief, but if there's anybody we would be okay with being the tribal chief, it would be Solo. And Roman was staring at Solo like he stole everything from him, like he was afraid of him. So I'm afraid for Solo, especially since Solo went for that splash and crashed through the table and really wasn't able to fully get up and get his bearings to help them win the match. I feel like now Roman is going to start treating Solo like trash. That is, if he's not already afraid of Solo. But this story never stops being good. It never stops being good. So I'm just excited about the future of where this is going to go. I'm just really pumped about it. I'm really pumped about it. So yeah, shout out to the Usos. Day one ish forever. So yeah, there was the picture of them before the match got started, and you can definitely cut the tension with a knife. You really could. But yeah. And now we're moving into, what more of what I liked in wrestling this week. And of course, you had Charlotte Flair versus Asuka for the WWE Women's Championship, which they haven't called the Women's Undisputed Championship for whatever reason, even though that's how it is on shop.com. I can't answer the question for them. But they fought in a match, and then Bianca bought her ticket to be there since she was barred from ringside, so she was there as a guest, right? So as the match kept going and as Asuka and Charlotte kept, jaw-jacking at Bianca, there was one point where Asuka moved out of the way and Charlotte actually kicked Bianca in the face, and she looked like she really didn't care that much about it. And so Bianca got pissed, and so she jumped up and interrupted Asuka and started beating up on her, which caused a DQ for Asuka, which allowed for her to retain her title and Charlotte, of course, to lose her opportunity. And then they all got into a fight. And then Bianca did the KOD onto Asuka and to Charlotte on the announce desk and wound up standing tall, looking like a Powerpuff Girl. So yeah, I love this because I just love this iteration of Bianca Belair. She's still our EST that we love, but at the same time, she's still standing on her own 2 feet and saying, you're not going to steal opportunities from me. I'm going to continue to take them. And I appreciate that assertiveness without being too aggressive and angry, because that when it comes to Black women in television or in anything else, they love to make it seem like, we're just illogically angry. No. When we're angry, usually it's for a reason. So I'm really happy that they're showing her being, assertive while also having people still love her and cheer for her. So big ups to Bianca Belair, and I hope you continue to get your lick back, girl, because we need it. Also, another thing that I loved in wrestling this week was the fact that I got to see Carmelo Hayes wrestle twice in 1 week. Because, of course, Carmelo Hayes is the NXT champion, and he was defending Seth Rollins on NXT when he went down there to fight Braun Breaker for the title, and Finn decided to gang up on Seth and beat up on him, leading up to their match towards Money in the Bank, and Carmelo and Trick defended him. So because of that, Finn challenged Carmelo to a match, because on Raw, Carmelo was sitting, in the front row. And then as Seth was out there, making his speech and saying his stuff or whatever in his promo, Carmelo was watching, and then Finn started attacking him yet again. So Carmelo defended him yet again, and Finn challenged Carmelo to a match, which means that this was the very first time that Carmelo performed on a Monday Night Raw, which he said was one of his biggest dreams as a child. He was like, this is a show that I used to watch as a child. So the fact that I just wrestled on it just, speaks volumes, and it blows his mind. And then on top of that, he got to make his entrance as the NXT champion. And even though Trick Williams wasn't there, Carmelo still looked like $1,000,000. He definitely looked like he belonged on a Monday Night Raw, or like he belonged on a Friday Night SmackDown. He looked so great here throughout this match. And even though he lost, the exposure is still there. There's a win in the idea that even as the NXT champion, he was able to make a Raw debut. So when the history goes to show, if he gets put on Raw, we can't ever say, well, oh, this is his first time on Raw. No, it's not. He fought Finn Balor when he was NXT champion. And then on top of that, it gets crazier because of the fact that Finn Balor is a 2-time NXT champion. And then Carmelo defended the first ever NXT champion in Seth Rollins. So you really have like a triangle of amazingness when it comes to the NXT title right there. Like, that was just so amazing, and I'm so happy that Carmelo had that moment. Like, he definitely deserves it. And then on top of that, he went on to defend his title against Baron Corbin on NXT the next night, in a very hard-fought match. Baron Corbin became the lone wolf again that we used to know him as back in the day when he had hair. And he definitely did look like a lone wolf. He looked like a wolf who hadn't eaten in about 3 years, because every time he was attacking Carmelo, it felt real personal and very dangerous. Like, he was beating him up and trying to knock him down every time Carmelo tried to get airborne. Like, it was just a lot going on. And he was getting real personal with a lot of people in the audience and stuff. Like, Baron Corbin was just being nasty. But y'all know Carmelo don't miss, and he wound up retaining his NXT title. So I feel especially blessed and spoiled that I got to watch Carmelo wrestle twice. And hopefully we'll get to see who else is, about to feud with him down the road for this title. But either way, Carmelo is him, and he is here to stay. And there are big things in store for him. Like, I'm just so excited. And I feel like I haven't truly been this excited for an NXT champion's future since the man formerly known as the Velveteen Dream. And I hate to even bring that up because, of course, his name is very unpopular amongst the wrestling landscape. But it felt like, at one time he had it all, and then it all slipped away because, he was arrogant and because he had gotten into some trouble and stuff. But now I felt like I would never get that excited about anyone else holding the NXT title. But now we have Carmelo here, and it's just like, boom. It's just great. Everything clicks. Everything makes sense. Carmelo is just that guy. And I'm just so happy that we get to witness his ascent in this lifetime. It's just great. Even though you can't tell by this picture, he won, and it's okay. So yeah. Now we're going to the call to action. Of course, we've reached the end of our time together. But of course, if you want to book your girl, Stephanie Hardy, as a host, a writer, a color commentator, or a panelist, know that you can email me at hardywrestlingpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also DM me on Twitter and on Instagram at Queen Steph Hardy. These are all the things that I've participated in within the past 3 years, and I'm really blessed to have done and accomplished all of that. But of course, if you're looking for anybody to do any of these things, just email me and just contact me, and we can make it happen. Okay, we will make it happen. So yeah, there's that. And then there's also the fact that my For Your Wear t-shirts are still on sale. You can still buy the Bold and the Bloodline t-shirts in all sizes in the color black. And you can buy my Beyonce's t-shirts, which celebrates the love of Bianca Belair and Montez Ford, with a ship t-shirt with their names together. So if you have a mind to, please purchase those t-shirts at foryourwear.com/Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And of course, the Alabama wrestling t-shirt and hoodies are still on sale. That celebrates Alabama wrestling figures such as Sensational Sherry, Teddy Long, Caleb Braxton, who had a really busy weekend of broadcasting this past week, Paul Bearer, Deborah, Fuego del Sol, and AQA, who was just featured on the Hot Wheels show on NBC. So if you have a mind to, and if you want to celebrate Alabamians' accomplishments in wrestling, please buy this unique t-shirt that was designed by me and my boyfriend, the Jockwin McCoy. Please purchase it in all sizes at foryourwear.com/Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And of course, if you want more of me and if you want to hear my voice more, you can check out my work at Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling show on the planet, on Mondays, which is tomorrow, on the Wow Superheroes After Show with Katrina from In Cat We Trust and Emily May Heller, and as well as the SmackDown After Show with our editor-in-chief, Dreon Santana, and other places you might catch me as well. On our website, www.talkpod.com, I have articles. I released a new article called Is Wrestling Ready for Prideful Love for Pride Month, and asking the question if wrestling has evolved to the point to where we can have a love story involving people of same-sex couples. So if you haven't read that already, please do. I'm really proud of it. I am so excited about it. So please go on the website. That's www.talkpod.com to catch it and just read it. So yeah, this has been a great episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Of course, if you didn't catch it here live, you can catch it later on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. And then of course you can listen to the audio as it becomes available either tonight or tomorrow, but either way it will be available to listen to on all audio platforms. So please check it out there, and just continue to support me and my wrestling career, and continue to support the brand. If you ever see me posting any clips, which is more than likely all the time throughout the week, please share them and subscribe. And also, when you do share them, say that it's the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and don't just retweet them or just share them and not put the name or not put my name or whatever. Give me my credit, please, so people can know who I am, and more notability can be garnered on behalf of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast and on behalf of me. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. And until next time, bye y'all.